Welcome back to the Connected podcast. I'm thrilled to bring you an extraordinary collection in which some incredible students take the driver's seat and host dynamic conversations with professionals from across the higher education sector, discussing the vital topic of student belonging. Bringing us another great episode is Felicity Rush. Felicity is joined by Cath Brown, a lecturer in the School of Maths and Statistics at the Open University. Cath has previously held the role of Student Union President. Cath joins Felicity today with her colleague Dr Sue Pawley, a senior lecturer also in Maths and Stats. Sue is the current director of eSTEeM, the STEM Centre of Scholarship and Innovation, as well as chair of the University Scholarship Steering Group.
Very nice to have you both on board. So your project, could you give me an overview on what you've been up to and what do our listeners need to know?
Well, we were looking at sense of community amongst our maths and stats students, and it had two aspects. One was looking at how students felt about community, their sense of community, and the other aspect was seeing if we could do anything to create more community. Mm-hmm. Any key bits I've missed out, Sue?
No, I think that's it, and I think it's one of those things. It really, we started off by trying to just create some more communities, so opportunities for our students to form their own communities, and I think that's really kicked off a real interest in that, how different it is to try and create a community in that virtual space than it is when actually you can just see people and rock up and have a cup of coffee or something.
So in the same vein of that, could you explain why student belonging is so important for students who study at distance or completely online?
Well, I think if I look at our students, an awful lot of them have been out of education for a while, and quite a few didn't have terribly good educational experiences in the past. That can why they've been out of education, it hasn't appealed to them, or they felt a bit unconfident. And typically they're going to be working. 76% of our students are working, plenty more are caring responsibilities or similar. So they're quite disconnected from conventional education, and quite often their immediate family and friends don't really understand why they're studying, and even if they're supportive, they don't quite get what it involves. So connection with others can be really important to actually give them some sort of student identity and to make them feel there's someone out there who cares about what they're doing.
Yeah, and also there's the academic side, isn't there? You know, degrees really by their nature are really demanding. And so to succeed, then, you know, students need to have that sort of resilience and a growth mindset. And one of the ways they get that is to have that community, you know, that person that's working along beside them, you know, the ones that can commiserate when times are tough, but also celebrate, you know, when you've got your grades back and you've had a good grade, you know, and it's that cognitive and emotional empathy that you need by working together as a student community. And there's very few people that can really understand what you're going through apart from those students alongside you, aren't you? So if we can get a community, then that can help with that resilience and that growth mindset, because I think, well, we can all do it together, you know. And so not only does that help with the community, help with resilience and growth mindset, actually what we find is because they gain that, then from a lecturer side, you know, well, then that helps us with our retention and progression, because the students that are working together tend to stay together and will stay on the courses. You know, but what we found though, especially for our students, because as Cath explained, you know, we quite often, our students are from that sort of non-traditional background, you know, they may never have thought about going to university, they may never have worried about it, they might not have known many people that have gone, you know. It's not just that it can be, you know, hey, look, we're all the same, because they don't necessarily feel that. So what they do need is that really caring community. They need to think that the people alongside them really care for them, but also the staff and the academic staff and the support staff that we have, that they really care for them, and we're all looking out for them. And that's shown to be really, really true, especially for those students that are first in the family to go to university, and actually also for female students as well.
Yeah, because obviously it's quite a male-dominated environment, maths and stats, I guess, particularly stereotypically anyway.
Yeah, it really is.
I had a discussion
Mm,
with a psychology professor who was doing male belonging in psychology because on the other end of the spectrum, psychology is very often very female dominated, which is a really interesting comparison to have between the two.
mm.
So,
I think one of the really interesting things we've got at the OU is, and we do women in STEM events as well. But if you look at the academic staff at the Open University Maths and Stats, you find that actually 50% of us are female, which
ah,
I think is pretty unusual given a maths department. So I think that's really helpful for the students within our university to look at us and go, well, actually, there are females in that academic side as well.
And we've got several female profs as well, haven't we? Which
Mm.
helps. It's not just that we've got more women at lower levels or anything like that. Our head of school is a woman, for example.
coming from a healthcare background, obviously, it's pretty much the opposite in some instances. So, what do distance learning students think a good community would look like, and how would that influence their sense of belonging in higher education?
Well, for us, because they're studying at a distance, one of those easiest forms of communities they have is when they come along to a tutorial, which is where we support students to help their distance study. And so lots of students want to come along to that, and that's quite often a place that they form communities with the people that are studying alongside. But they do also still want more than that as well, though. Even though it's a distance learning university, they still do want those social friendships. They want those social events, and equally just those casual conversations with others, which can be really hard at that distance education because you tend to just come together for specific things. And so, just those casual conversations that you might have, when you just, I don't know, chatting with someone in the queue for the cafe or something, or at the student union bar. We don't have those opportunities more, so we have to almost create those. But our students still do want those social connections and those casual ones. So we do need to create those virtual opportunities to meet up. And equally with our students, and it may be because they're older or they're more from different parts of society and have different backgrounds and quite often have a lot of life experience. It's not just other students they want to talk to, they really want to have these connections with staff as well.
And another aspect of it is that the size of the community matters. They like feeling part of something larger. We had several students feeding back how they really like being part of, for example, our module introductory event when you've got, over 1,000 students on the module. And they also mentioned communities that stretch across the whole academic journey, in addition to the ones just within the module, so that you're connecting with people from when you start to the end. That's not so easy for us because of the modular structure and people study at different rates. So it's not that you're going through with one particular cohort. But the idea of having something that does stretch across that journey, despite that, was really appealing. And they mentioned the benefit of having access to people further along, from someone who did the module that you've done last year to alumni who are going on to succeed in their career. And they felt it made the big picture planning an awful lot easier when you could actually visualize what someone like you went on to do.
Yeah. So, specific strategies in terms of what distance learners are using um, to increase their sense of belonging. We've obviously touched on some of them in terms of sort of keeping in touch outside of just lectures and making more social stuff. But are there specific things you're doing, such as Discord groups or calls? What's the idea on that?
Yeah, as Cath said a minute ago, I think we're really quite unique in the way our universities run because we are not only distance, but we're also aimed at being a part-time university. We have students that are studying at loads of different study intensities. So we've got lots of students that are studying at a full-time intensity, but we have lots of students that are studying just occasionally, which means that you could start your degree with a group of people on one module, but then on the next module in the pattern of the degree, there could be completely different people on it because some might only be studying one module a year, some might be studying all four a year, so it's so unlikely that you're gonna go through your whole degree life with the same group of people, and you mix and match, and you find people that you haven't studied with for maybe 2 or 3 years, and suddenly they'll appear in your module again, and you'll go, oh, I haven't seen you for ages, kind of thing. So what the strategies that we need to work is we need to focus our strategies around that singular module rather than the whole degree cohorts. But what it also means that we have to do is that we can't just concentrate on those freshers. We can't just concentrate on those at the start and say, well, hey, look, there you go, you've made your social networks, you've made your friends, they'll see you through your 3 or 4, or in our case up to 10 years, and you'll be with them all the time, because they won't. Which means that we need to look at strategies that will work on those single modular basis. So we do a lot. We keep it within our site. So we encourage students to set up things like Discords, but they're very much student driven. But as a university, we make sure we have things like we build social time into tutorials so that the students can have time to talk to each other. We have both active, both academic, but also social forums. So there's opportunities for them to talk to each other in safe spaces, because that's a really important thing to me. We need to make sure that safe is space. The space is safe, even rather than the safest space. The space is safe. We've even got things like we have a forum that we deliberately have that, as Cath said, that connection with students that are higher up is really important to them. So we even have forums that are led by students who have already studied the module, and that's a really good place to do, because they feel they can ask them anything, really. It's not that, hey, I'm asking the lecturer something. It's I'm asking someone that studied it, and so they're going to find those bits that are hard and tough and can give me that energy when I need to. So we call them student buddies forums. And yeah, that's simply just where a student that's already studied the module is now kind of overlooking a forum, and they'll ask questions, and they'll say, oh, just to let you know, there's this tricky bit coming up. So, here's a picture of my cat in case you need a pick me up.
Absolutely. Cats and dogs very important for pick-me-ups and maths memes and anything like that. It's all a bit of fun. Now, although, as Sue said, a lot of it is within the module, but there can be some broader things as well. So, for example, we run a large face-to-face event for maths and stats students that's nominally about choosing their modules, and there were talks about all the different modules and careers talks and things like that. But a lot of it is about the opportunity for those students to come together. So, for example, we ran one last year on our campus in Milton Keynes. We ran one this year in central Birmingham. Our students are everywhere, so obviously we have to move it around a fair bit. And I'm also going to mention things that are done by the Student Union, putting my old hat on there, that they have a number of virtual events as well. And obviously they offer opportunities for students to connect outside the immediate academic context. And what I think is crucial as well is our students are very time poor. So there's plenty of them who would like to be able to volunteer to do things, but they can't take on a large commitment or something terribly regular. But nonetheless, they still have that impulse to want to be involved and to help their peers. So some of the things that the Student Union do, for example, are things that enable a student to volunteer in a very specific time-limited way. So, for example, they can help run the merchandise stand at graduation, which is a lovely thing. They can be a volunteer to access library materials for one of our students studying in secure environments. And there are other kind of small scale things like that that give pretty well everybody the opportunity to be involved in some sort of way. And being able to help someone else is very empowering, I think, and particularly important for those students lacking in confidence that they can actually be of use to someone else.
Definitely. So obviously you've discussed student union role, but what role do other staff, aside from student union, play in shaping the sense of community and connection for students who actually won't ever set foot on campus?
So it goes back to that modular support again, and because it's all at a distance and it all has to be structured, where we play this really key role is making sure we've set up the right places for them for the students to want to come and want to share and want to interact. And so we need those forums. So we need those chat spaces. They need to be helpful and timely, so it feels like it's not, like they put something out there and then they wait a week. But also it needs to be really non-judgmental and friendly. And what happens is on all these forums, we've got staff that oversee them. And so that's where that really careful monitoring comes in, just to make sure that none of the students are, overstepping the mark, and that these monitors are also constantly feeding in that support and that commitment and that care. And it keeps it timely, and also that the information that's being shared is correct as well, because there's nothing worse when you're out, feel like you're out studying on your own and someone tells you something that's wrong, isn't it? It's just, so that's one of the ways that staff are really, really key in that, and that's a really hard job, and we're so grateful to our staff that do monitor those forums, because it is really on that edge. The other thing we spend a lot of time doing is planning tutorials, and that's our tutorial timetables, not only what we actually put into the tutorials, but also, because that's our main community space, how it's going to be. So we want to make sure that they're in a room full of like-minded students, really. And on one of the modules that Cath and I work a lot on, we've spent a really long time really looking at those different structures, and we do things like we have we run tutorials for students that have got different study goals. So because what you can quite often find is that you can go into a tutorial space and there'll be students in that are amazing at what they're doing, and they're asking these really hard questions of the tutor. And as a tutor, I'm kind of going, oh God, don't ask me the hard questions. But within the room, there's other students that are going, oh my God, there's everyone else knows everything, and I can't possibly be part of this community because I don't know this stuff, which means that they don't come back the next time. So we try and run tutorials where they've got different study goals. So we're looking at students that, that are just waiting to pass, just want the basic stuff, I'm really struggling here. Can you just tell me those bits that are going to get me through the next assignment, going to get me through the degree? And equally, we run tutorials for those students that are like, hey, I'm freezing at this. This is in my zone. I understand this. So I want to go there, and I want to be stretched. I want to be pushed. And so we run tutorials for those students, which means that we put them both into spaces where they feel confident and happy talking and express themselves, and forming those connections with other students and with the staff. We also do things like we run them with different study patterns, so we make sure we run some during the day and run some during the evenings. We run them for those students that just want that weekly hit as well of a bit of study support. So that is really key, and that is one of those things where staff really are really important about how we can build the foundations for the students to form that community.
Yeah.
And following on from what Sue was saying there about tutorials, we do have some specific, sorry, this is my pet project, things where students are specifically given the opportunity to discuss problems together and work on them together, not in the sense of assessed collaborative work, which, however educational it is, most people find really stressy, but just in the sense of, hey, let's have a go at this together. And they've fed back to us that that's nice, because they spend time on the maths, but they also spend time having a whinge about, oh, my life isn't book C, horrible, and that sort of thing. Just having the sort of chance to have those conversations that you have in the queue for the coffee, normally speaking, which I think is crucial. And another aspect, not just the designing tutorials for different groups, is how you are in a tutorial if you're giving one, that to actually show that you're a human being, because it's quite easy to forget that when people are at a distance. So the fact that I might blather on about the weather at the beginning, or that my students will laugh about the fact I'm bound to be going to have a glass of wine at the end of it, that tends to be a bit of a good thing for ice breaking, to make them realise, yeah, I'm a human being, you can take the mick out of me too, and that sort of thing. And it's similarly in the tone for the forums. As Sue said, we've got these moderators, but you also get the tone right, so that you're not jumping down someone's neck so that they feel afraid. You're kind of gentle, facilitating, as well as keeping a watchful eye.
Yeah, because it can be difficult to get tone right online, I think, particularly in sort of written messages. But saying that, what are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to supporting belonging for remote students, and how might you address these creatively or structurally?
Well, because our students are part-time and they have many, many other commitments on their time, it can be harder for them to spend time in building a community that they can't directly link to academic study. They feel really guilty because they're taking time away from their family or their job or their caring responsibilities to just do social stuff. And it feels, oh, how can I do it? I'd feel dreadful if I do that. So we have to look at ways to address that, to make sure they can feel that that time is justified. So then that's why things like the tutorials that we mentioned work well, because they can do the social aspect, but it's study related. It's not that they're just kind of wagging off from everyday life. But there can be a conflict as well between trying to create a small group to foster belonging versus if the group's too small, then are you creating barriers between students who might otherwise connect? I mean, if you happen to be in a tutor group, say, where some of the other students weren't terribly communicative, then it can be a bit of an issue. So we like to have a combination of small group things and larger opportunities to allow students to make those cross connections. And Sue alluded to earlier that students can feel worried that they are less than others. And it's really important to see someone like me, so to speak, for them. And I think the fact that quite a lot of our academic staff have studied with the OU themselves can help that. And we always encourage people to share that sort of fact.
So, okay, so in sort of an overall view, looking ahead to the future, what do you see as the most urgent or promising areas for future research into student belonging in distance and online education? I've talked a lot about previously in-person education, but I'd like your perspective on distance education.
And that's interesting. I think one of the big things was COVID, wasn't it? That really did hit. And I think that kind of moved everyone into that distance education setting. And everyone went, obviously, because of the situation, everyone went online mad, and all the universities working online. And it was brilliant as Open University lecturers, because we were also in demand to teach people how to teach online, which was quite nice. Especially maths and things. We did a lot of presentations around universities virtually on how to teach virtually, which is quite nice. But and all our other students came, and at the OU, and we had a huge influx, and suddenly the students were coming to everything because they were looking for that connection as well. But I think one of the things that's happened since then is that I've kind of got over that, you know, and we're now kind of almost in that Netflix generation, aren't we? You know, where everything expects everything to be recorded and everything's on demand whenever they want it. And so one of the biggest challenges for us, and one of the biggest things that we're looking to push forward and to work out how we can do better, and so from that point of view, being the research, is that is actually trying to work out how we can get students to come back and to actually really realize how much that sense of belonging, that sense of community is important, to give them that, I'll say resilience, but it's not necessarily, it's that certain form of resilience. It's that community. It's that we're going to do it together. I've got friends that I want to stay with and I want to work with and I want to push through. And so I think that's one of the things for us, because, you know, at the moment we've got a lot of students that will either, you know, they might sign up to say they're going to come to a tutorial and to an event. And then they'll go, oh, you know what? It's recorded. I'll just watch it later. Or they'll come in and they'll physically be in the room, you know, but the telly might be on in the corner, or there might be other things going on in the background. I mean, I think one of the hardest things about online education is when people come into the room and your attention's drawn, and suddenly you've lost what the lecturer is saying, and then you're back, and then you've lost it. So at that point you just go, well, there's no point listening anymore. I'll just watch the recording. But then that's the community that's gone.
On a more positive note, I think one of the things I want to look at is getting that balance. That we tried doing some what you might call top-down events, and that's good. We should absolutely be trying to do that. But it's not really as authentic as something that is entirely student-led. However, it's quite hard for students to lead something independently when they are as dispersed as our students are. So I think what we would like to do is to work on how we can facilitate student-led initiatives to build that sort of connection. So we're kind of meeting in the middle between the top-down and the bottom-up. And we've seen a few nice examples of that so far. For example, students organising via Discord a thing called Study With Me, where they're all studying at the same time. They're on camera, they don't talk, but they can see each other as if they were in the library. And that was developed by a few individual students, and it was taken up by the student union and promoted further. So that sort of facilitating student activities, I think, would be a really good way forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting point of view to have from online higher education providers, because obviously a lot of people will assume higher education is in person on campus and it's all very sort of set structured, but it's lovely to have the perspective of the Open University. So thanks so much for joining me, Cath and Sue. It's been so lovely to talk to you.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting us.
It's been lovely to talk to you as well, Felicity. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Connected podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out the rest of our extraordinary Voices of Belonging collection and stay connected.